So we have understood the other important property of polymorphism, which is operator overloading, as the same place operator is perform multiple operations, right? Now let's understand the third property. So let me keep this as comment, and which is method overloading, because already we have seen method overriding when we have discussed about the inheritance concept, where we have seen about constructor overriding. Even we have done with the same method names and the method is overridden. So with the help of super method, we are able to call the superclass constructor and pass arguments. We are also able to call the superclass constructor when we have defined it directly. That's the same thing which we have defined earlier. You can just refer it. Let me just show it. Yes. So here we have declared the same thing. So now let's understand the third property, which is method overloading. So what do you mean by overloading? We are making it burden, right? In the same way, actually, this concept is not available in Python. If you are having any awareness of other programming language like Java, it is nothing but when we write a method if a method is written such that it can perform more than one task, that is method overloading. And we make it simple. If a method is written which that is such that it can perform more than one task. If a method is written such that it can perform more than one task. It can perform more than one task. So that is generally called as method overloading. That is method overloading. So because this is generally available in Java, but when it comes to Python, it's not available. That doesn't mean that we have it, if it is not available, why we are learning. Let me make it simple. Writing more than one method with the same name is not possible. That's where it becomes overloaded. That is the reason, if you remember, if I'm writing same method names, I'm just trying to use some arguments different. I mean, not arguments differing, I'm just trying to refer it with another method names. When you go for inheritance concept, I have done the same thing. Because in inheritance only you just see the property. Without inheritance, it is different. It only depends on the type of object we invoke. That is the reason when you go for method overloading, we can achieve the method overloading by writing method with several parameters. That means if we try to perform a simple operation. So for that, let me try to take an example where we try to show method overloading by performing sum of 2 or 3 numbers. So to show method overloading to perform sum of 2 or 3 numbers, that's where we are trying to revert it. That is to find sum of 2 or 3 numbers. 2 or 3 numbers. So that is nothing but how do we relate it. So for that, I declare my class name as Saket. So I declare my name itself. So my class name is Saket, and what I do is I define a method called as sum. So where I just try to make sure, because sum is already a built-in function. Yes, you can use the name, or if you just keep it worried, you just use another name. SUMM. You see, don't get the dog string over there, right? That is the description for that function, where I try to make sure, I want to make sure this sum method perform multiple operations depending on the arguments passed. That's where we are overloading it. So for that reason, I pass the reference and I can make it usage, right? So I can directly use none, because if I use none, nothing but we can use a default value, that is default is none. So based on that only, when we pass arguments, it will accept the input. Make sure that you write it as capital. N is capital because Python is case sensitive. So depending on your input, it will be taken. If you write in this way, it is a variable. It tells you none is not defined. That's where you always observe colors, because that's where color coding can be done. That is the reason, the main reason we are using Python ideally. So doc string is understanding method overloading. Let me just make it simple. So now I have defined the method as sum. My intention is to overload this sum method, right? So I use my conditions, because depending on the number of arguments, whether I pass 2 arguments, 3 arguments, or 1 argument, it should perform the same operation, right? For the first case, to perform multiple conditions, I just go for if else, right? So if A is not equal to none, see, n should be capital. If n is small letter, that is wrong. So if n is not equal to none and b is not equal to none, and you are passing 3 objects over here, and c is not equal to none. So when you pass all of them, you can clearly see what is the change you are expecting here. So a is not equal to none, b is not equal to all of them. So you can just make it print off. What do you pass over here? So print of sum of 3 numbers. So sum of 3 objects, I can say sum of 3 is equal, because I don't know whether I give integer or string, whatever it is. Sum of 3 is, I just declare a plus b plus c. Make sure that you are writing n as capital in none. That is very important. So just come out of the condition, because you want to write one more condition. Elif, you are passing only 2 arguments over there, a not equal to none. And because why do you are using AND logic here? Because AND is a logical operator where if both the conditions are matching, you can take the result over there. So that is the reason we are defining none. So and b not equal, and not none. So b not equal to none. So finally again you can just give print of sum of 2. So print of sum of 2 is equal to, again give a plus b. There you go. Finally, if your user is giving only one argument, write an else condition over there or make it exception, then only you can say it. So print of please enter, tell him to enter 3 arguments at least. Please enter 2 or 3 arguments, then only user will understand. That's it. So now create an instance for your class, that is Saket. So just call some method. So how do you call some method? You first create an object. So using object. So that object is basically, I just give d is equal to, call the instance here Saket. Now when you define this, or when you just check the directory, you just ask directory of d, you only get some method, right? So depending on your number of input, that is d dot sum, it expects 3. Suppose if I give 1, 2, 5, you get 8, because sum of 3 is 8. Or even if you pass 2 inputs, that is code and Saket, you can see that is code plus Saket will be code Saket. And even if you pass 2 strings, right, something like 2 float values or 1 float and 1 string, 1 integer, you could see, because we are loading the same method, because the sum method is calculating sum of 2 or 3 numbers. And what happens if you don't declare anything? Please enter, because you're not declaring anything, right? That's where. What happens if you declare 1, 4, 5, 8? There you go. It takes 1, 2, 4 positional arguments, but 5 are given because self is again treated over there. So 3, 2 or 1. Or if you don't give anything, you are getting this. Please enter 2 or 3 arguments. So that is how we are overloading our sum method. That is, in this way, overloaded methods achieve polymorphism, because we are using the same method multiple times or exhibiting in different ways. That means you can take, even suppose if you give 25, suppose if you give 2 strings here in digit string, that is 2, 5, like this, then you can expect the difference, that is 2, 5. And if you pass 1 integer and 1 string, obviously what do you get? It is type error, that is unsupported operand. Whether you give 2 arguments, 3 arguments or no argument, your program will be executed, because that's how you are overloading the sum method. So based on this, we can clearly understand how method overloading is also an example of polymorphism.